Welcome to Feminine Roadmap Podcast. I'm your host, Gina-r-Farrar. Each week, I bring you an inspiring conversation to help you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife so that you can not only survive, but thrive in your second half. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here, and today we are going to be talking about how to go from chaos to clarity. We all have chaos that comes into our life, but learning how to move through it and make it to the other side is key. And using what we've learned in the past is a powerful way to help us get there, and exercising faith and giving back. And today, to talk about this topic with me, I have Kathleen-Okeefe-Kanavos. She's the Queen of Dreams. She's a 3-time breast cancer survivor and the co-author of Chaos to Clarity, Sacred Stories of Transformational Change. And so, Kathleen, thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thank you, Gina, for having me.
It is my pleasure. Now, you and I were getting to know each other before we hit record, and you were sharing that this book is a powerful resource in and of itself, of different stories of women who had some sort of chaos in their life and they moved to clarity. What was it that you and your co-author, Patricia, what is it that led you to write this book?
Well, Patricia and I met, we've never met each other. We've only worked together over the phone. And we were introduced by email by a friend. And then we got to talking and we realized that there are so many women out there who are in a place of chaos and they're really kind of stuck there. And we all get into chaos. That's normal. That's all part of the learning curve of being a human being. But we started talking about how important it is and would be if we could share stories of not just women who were in tremendous chaos, but how they got through the storm and came out the other side. We all want to know about those chaotic stories, but more importantly, we want to know how they came through the storm and use that information to continue with their life on a better journey.
That sounds like you must have gotten so many amazing submissions. There must have been so much of an emotional journey for you and Patricia as well to read the stories of these women. So how did you go about choosing the stories that felt right for this time in this book?
Well, we were looking for not only the chaos, but we also had to see the clarity. And they were the stories that made us laugh and they made us cry. And, at first I thought, well, it's just Patricia and I, we're crying because, we're soft, feminine people. But it turned out that the editors would send us emails and say, we will get it done by tomorrow. We were just crying so hard when we were editing the book. We had to take a break. And all these stories are so important that we just had to stop and think about them. And they so dove into the editing. They did way more editing than we had even asked them to, which was wonderful. But yeah, the stories really were moving. And that's what we looked for.
Awesome. Well, why don't you share some of these stories and how they have created impact in your life and how you hope that they help my audience, my midlife audience. How does that message of chaos to clarity reach the people that we're sharing with today?
Well, there's quite a few stories in here, but I'm going to pick some that many women go through. So, for instance, there's 4 parts to the book. In part 1, it's called Love and Relationships, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. And we have Third Time's a Charm by Denise Alexander Pyle. And she was this really successful lawyer. And she had this idea in her mind of what the perfect mate would be, the perfect husband. And so she almost had like this little checklist. And when she'd meet these guys, she'd check the checklist off. And she'd marry him and it would fall apart. And then one day she is in a country and Western bar, where she doesn't even like country and Western music. She goes there with her niece, and she meets this guy who does not match anything on her checklist, nothing. And within 4 months, they're married. And that was years and years and years ago. And it was perfect. So she talks about the chaos she's going through, but he's not what I have in mind for the perfect mate. But sometimes our relationships and the people that we love are like kittens. They choose us. We don't necessarily choose them. And that's what she learned. And then another one that a lot of women go through is that relationship of, sometimes love is not reason enough to marry someone. Sometimes we have those female intuitive hits that no, this is not right. The flags are there, but we're led by our heart rather than our minds. There's a story called, it's still in part 1, They Are Coming Home, and it's by Arnita. And she is talking about how she has these 2 beautiful little boys, and she finally realizes this marriage is not going to work. It's just not going to work. And so she does get divorced, and her husband moves to another country, but he comes back, and she's in South Africa. He comes back to visit the boys, and one day when he comes to visit the boys, he's taking them for an overnight. And she's all excited because she wants her boys to spend more time with their father. He steals them and takes them to another country. He takes them to Portugal. And she spends years and years and years trying to get them back. And she's so angry. And she's trying to navigate the legal waters of one country to another. And finally, after years and years of fighting, she gets the children back. So what does she do? She forgives him. She says she has to go outside away from the children, and she yells and screams at the sky, and she calls him every name under the sun, and she purges herself of the hate. And then she goes back in and writes him a letter and says, I understand you did what you did because of the way you were raised, the abuse you had as a child. I forgive you and still will allow you to see your sons despite the fact that you stole them. And I thought, oh my God, are you kidding me? And he never answered her letter and never showed up again and was never a part of their life. But that forgiveness was the healing point. And there are many other stories in this book. And another big thing that women go through is the downsizing in midlife crisis. You have this huge home, you raised all your children in this gigantic family home, and you've got an attic full of memories, you've got a basement full of memories, and now you've got to sort through the memories. And in both of these stories in here, they refer to it as like a roller coaster ride, where you look at the memories and you're laughing and you're so happy to see them again. One woman actually found the key to her house that she had been hunting for years in the pocket of a coat she was getting ready to throw out. And remembering that key brought back all these memories because it was to her parents' house. So the stories talk about the solutions that they came to in order to make it through this roller coaster ride and not allow this to destroy their marriage, because a lot of times moving and the change of moving itself, besides the fear, can destroy a marriage that has been strong for years.
Now, you being someone in your second half, what has been the impact on your life as a woman in this season from these stories? What have you taken away from them?
I would say that there are 3 things that I realized reading these stories in Chaos to Clarity. One of the things that really struck me about these stories were how the women in the stories, especially the women who lost loved ones, one woman lost her child, another one lost her husband, who was the love of her life. And these women contemplated suicide. They were that devastated. They didn't really want to live here anymore. One woman has an incredible horse sanctuary in England. And her horses realized what had happened, and they rallied around her and made her a part of their herd, and they helped her heal using animal love. It was just an absolutely amazing story. And with another one, she started the sanctuary, and now anyone who is in crisis can come to the sanctuary, and her horses help them heal. The other one was a woman who lost her husband, and she started a radio network. All of the stories in this book, when the person came through the crisis into the sunshine, said, I could keep going, or I could turn around and help others. And that's what they did. They began to help others. The other thing was something I touched on already, forgiveness. Every single story in this book talked about how important forgiveness was. No matter whether they were cleaning out their house, came across somebody who they had disliked for generations, when they threw out those physical things, they realized that forgiveness would be the only thing that would really close that door. Forgiveness was very important. And then the third thing was the importance of your higher power to get you through the storm, to get you through the chaos into the clarity. Sometimes, not sometimes, every single person in this book, and I realized that when I was going through my breast cancer all 3 times, I wasn't strong enough to do it by myself. I needed to lean on someone, and that someone I leaned on was really my higher power, my husband, but especially my higher power. When I felt like I just couldn't do it anymore, I would give all of that angst to my God and said, okay, this is yours. You deal with it. I'm not going to deal with it. And it was always dealt with. And I made it through. That was over 20 years ago.
And that impact, how did you move in your own journey from chaos to clarity?
Well, I became an RA blood cancer hotline guide. So when a woman would call up with cancer and was, in chaos, I would speak to them and help them find the resources they needed, get the treatment that they needed, whatever it was. In one case, one woman had been diagnosed with recurrence. And see, there were very few counselors that dealt with recurrence. And she was beside herself because she was losing her house. She had lost her job because she needed to do treatment. She had stopped her treatment because she felt like she had to go back to work to not lose her house. And she didn't even have the money to feed her dog. So all the other counselors at the RA Block Cancer Foundation made the phone calls they needed to make to get her help that she needed in order to take care of all those crises and help her get the funding, get the help, get the food for her dog that she needed so that she could get the treatment and survive. So again, even though I had not been well that long, and when you've been through a crisis like that and you haven't been well or out of that crisis that long, you still have fear. It's like being in a terrible automobile accident, walking away from the car and then saying, yeah, but I need to get back into the car and drive to help somebody else. And there's a part of you going, no, we're going to get in another accident. But all of the women, all of the people in this book were strong enough to get back in that car and help others.
So let's talk a little bit about chaos, the different kinds of chaos that could be happening in a woman's life in the second half. We are talking about changes in marriage, moves, body changes, mindset changes, all the different things. What kind of tools and resources have you learned through this journey that could help someone who's navigating the challenges and changes of midlife?
Well, I think one of the most important things to remember and hold on to is that as human beings, we don't like change. There's actually a word for it, metathesiophobia, and it's the phobia of change. As human beings, we like routine. We don't really like surprises, even though we say we do. We really don't like surprises. We want to know what they are. We want to know that it's good. And we want to be able to depend on continuity. So when we have to move, when our bodies start going through changes, when our children grow up and move away, when we have to downsize, when our life goes into a different direction, it really throws us for a loop. And we think that there's something wrong with us because we don't like that. We don't want to do that. It's perfectly normal. Since the beginning of caveman, once caveman found and cave woman found something that worked, it was our natural inclination to say, okay, we found something that worked. We're going to stick with this. And we're going to stick with it until it doesn't work. Well, that's what the chaos is. Suddenly, it doesn't work anymore, but we're not always sure what we should do. And it's often not until our back is up against the wall that we go, okay, I have to change. It's not until, in the case of a marriage with Teresa Velarde in the book, and her story is called Courage is Fear That Said Its Prayers. She is suddenly up against the wall, literally, with a husband who has a knife to her throat, realizing she must get out of this marriage. She keeps thinking she can fix it, which women do. And when she suddenly realizes, not only can I not fix it, my life is in danger, my son's life is in danger, it's time for change. She knows she can't depend on herself and goes to AA for spouses and gets a tribe around her and gets the strength to move out of that, finally move out of that. And today she helps women all over the world with the same crisis. Because like I said, we'd rather stick with what we know, the devil we know, than the devil we don't know. And that's normal.
There's something in the story that I'm picking up on, which is most of these things aren't happening suddenly. It's like boiling a frog. You put the frog in cold water, you slowly turn up the heat. The frog doesn't notice the change in the temperature of the water. I think sometimes chaos can be similar to that water, right? We allow ourselves to get in situations, or we end up in situations, or we put ourselves in situations that lead to chaos. I know for a lot of people, chaos is a state of being. It's what they're comfortable with. And so they're seeking that chaos without realizing it. So they just repeat these chaotic patterns. So in each one of these stories, you have women that are acknowledging a situation and seeing it for what it is and making a decision. There's a point in time where a decision is made to shift toward a solution, the clarity piece, not staying inside of the chaos. And I think for a lot of women in midlife, it feels chaotic because our parents are aging, our kids might be going through a lot, our marriages, like we said, might be struggling. They may not be, but we might find ourselves dissatisfied with where life has taken us, right? And that chaos can be a result of how we deal with all of these transitions and challenges. And so when we're thinking about going from chaos to clarity, it's really taking some time for each one of us to think about where we're really at, how we really feel about that, and what we're going to do about it, if anything. Because I think one of the temptations might be victimhood.
Well, often I think, that's a great, great point. And often, there are so many people who are raised in chaos. And so that's their norm. They don't know any differently. They were raised in a chaotic marriage. Their parents had chaotic relationships. They moved all the time. There was never a feeling of clarity. Dad's got a job today, tomorrow he won't have a job. There's drinking problems. There's all kinds of problems. And they grow up in that. So they seek their norm. And that is their norm, as you said. And then when they're finding that they just can't, then usually what happens is there are physical and health issues that are a result of it, because we're not meant to run on high like that. We start blowing hoses, as it were. And we suddenly realize, this can't be the norm. This can't be real. It doesn't, I'm used to it, but it doesn't mean it feels good. And so there's an important part in this book that I just loved it. It was my favorite part. And it's called Part 5, words of wisdom. If I knew then what I know now. And every single author in the book talked about, if they knew then what they know now, what would they have done differently? And I think it's a great answer to the points that you just brought up. What if your norm is the chaos, but you think perhaps there could be a different answer, and you seek clarity? But if you've never had clarity, if you've never been in non-chaos, how do you know when you run up against it? How do you know? Maybe you think it's boring, and it might be by comparison. But at some point, you don't want to run on empty, and you don't want to run in the red zone anymore. You're going to burn out.
You said, ask yourself, if I knew then what I know now, what would I have done differently? I think that's one of the key things to shift situations and experiences in our life. When we're in chaos, it becomes comfortable. Like you said, the devil I know is better than the devil I don't know. But what if? What if it's not better, the chaos that you're in? If we could actually get in the habit of asking ourselves really good questions while we're in the chaos, questions like, what is it about this situation that keeps me here? Like getting really honest with ourselves about things like that. If I were my best friend, what advice would I give myself, right? Get almost like being a third person to your own situation, trying to get some perspective. I do notice that when people are in chaos, it's hard to find the kind of support you need naturally. In other words, you have to find the people who won't perpetuate the chaos with you. You've got to find that person that's outside of the chaos who can keep kind of drawing your eyes and your mind to healthier decisions, healthier thoughts, new solutions to your situation, right? So the way to clarity is doing and saying and thinking differently than you're currently doing, thinking, and saying.
Mm-hmm. It's a mind shift. Absolutely. It's a mind shift. That's where, trusting in that higher power comes into play, because I believe we are all born with guardian angels, spirit guides. We're their job, and that take that job very seriously. And one of the things that we may need to be doing at this point in our life when we're going through that chaos is to go through that chaos. As Winston Churchill said, when you're walking through hell, keep going. Don't stop and look around. Keep going. Come out the other side. And so we all have a life purpose. There's a reason that we're here. Nothing in this world just happens. As you mentioned earlier, there are steps that lead up to it. Even if there's a storm, the clouds start to build together, and that's a little bit of that butterfly effect that we talk about in the book. That butterfly flapping its wings over in China can affect us here. We're seeing that now. That universal oneness, we're all interconnected. So even if your parents told you just happened in the back seat of that old Ford, you didn't. You happened on purpose. You have a life purpose. And maybe one of the reasons you're going through the chaos you're going through is to learn to help others come out that other side as well. Maybe that's part of your life purpose. And that is where connecting with your inner guidance through prayer, dreams, quiet moments where you can speak with your inner selves is really important, because there's a reason you're going through this, and just as there's a reason you're here. And so sometimes you just have to embrace it. It's like saying, okay, yes, there is a boogeyman in the closet. I'm going to open up the closet door and I'm going to talk to him. And suddenly you realize there's no boogeyman there. And you start laughing. And as soon as you start laughing at the boogeyman has no power.
A lot of the time it's true. It's how we perceive a situation or a person that is the power, right? In other words, we don't realize how often the power lies within us.
Right. And we attract what we focus on. So if we are only focusing on our crises, and let's say that's all we're talking about, that's all we're feeling, like attracts like. You're going to attract other people who are also in crises. You want to attract the people who have already come out the other side. And that's why, as a resource, the book, Chaos to Clarity, and you can see with all my little notes and stuff, I use this all the time because in the back of the book is the website of every single author in this book. You can get in touch with them and say, you know what? I'm going through the same thing. How did you come out the other side? They'll help you.
You mentioned that we attract what we focus on, like attracts like. And that was kind of what I was saying before is when we are in chaos, we will be drawn to chaotic things and often chaotic people. So there's this awareness that comes that allows us, like I said, to step outside and give that third person perspective on our own life. It's really making a choice, one choice. It's like the rudder on a ship, right? In order to turn a ship around, you have that one part, that little rudder, and it has to turn. And the littlest, merest degree of shift in that rudder will move the entire ship in a different direction. And I feel like that awareness that we're talking about, that really recognizing that this chaos has a purpose, is that rudder. So instead of being out of control and everything just kind of happening to us, how we view the chaos could be the rudder of our ship. That could be the thing that begins to shift us out of the deepest part of the waters, right? Or the more turbulent part of the waters. The only way to get through the chaos is to get through the chaos and not to stay in the midst of it, right?
Right. When you're in hell, keep going. Walk through it, get out the other side. Don't stay there.
That is a really great quote. So when we're talking about clarity, would you agree that the clarity is something that comes by degrees? It's not a one and done, a to-do list type of experience. It really is part of the going through the hell. Mm-hmm. Those pinpricks of light or those pieces of clarity come to the people that are seeking it?
Oh, absolutely. I think that there are small degrees of clarity that are happening, and then all of a sudden you have this aha moment. Aha, if I change this, if I change that rudder just a little bit, it's going to make all the difference in the world. And sometimes that clarity can be kind of painful. You can suddenly realize, hey, I have surrounded myself with people that are not necessarily doing me good. I may need to change my core group for a while I grow within myself. And then that doesn't mean I have to wash them out of my life, but maybe I take them in smaller degrees. And the quickest way to change the people around you is to change yourself first. You can't change people around you. You really can't. But when you change yourself first, they must change in order to deal with the new you. And a lot of times that means that they have to change, and that's frightening to them. So the behaviors that they've been using around you and on you up until this point that have worked, when they suddenly find they're not working, usually those behaviors will get worse before they get better by changing. And you're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to hold on to that rudder and say, no, I am not going to let the wind blow me in another direction. I'm going to hang on to I'm going to tie it down, and I'm going to hang on to it. And eventually the other people will find that when they make the change in order to be able to still be a part of your life, they like the change they've made in order to continue to converse and be with the new you. And that's one of your first signs that there was a flapping of those butterfly wings, and it's making a universal change in your small world, which is again changing all the way out around the world. And we're seeing that, like we said, with this, coronavirus that's happening right now. Those little butterfly wings flapped over there in China, and look at what happened here. And now, can you imagine, Gina, all those people who are shut into their homes with huge extended families? They've got to work through a lot of chaos. And when they come out, there's going to be a lot of clarity. And you know what? We want to hear about it. Patricia and I want to hear about it. And that's where our second book in this series is going to be coming out, Crappy to Happy. And so if you find that you're running out of paper products, that may be a great story for the book, because people don't have the products that they need. But the stories are going to be awesome.
You talked about changing by degrees and how that affects people around you. One of the things about moving from chaos to clarity that I have found is there is a cost to staying in chaos, and there's a cost to moving through it and getting through to the clarity on the other side. The cost when we're in chaos it's a cost to our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health. When we, like you said, run on that high stress place for so long, it breaks us down. We are not meant to be in fight or flight all the time. Mm-hmm. It's a resource that our body has to get us out of danger. But if we find ourselves in chaos all the time, then we are at that high alert all the time. And we see all kinds of autoimmune diseases and things happening. I think it has a lot to do with that central nervous system just being absolutely overloaded with the chaos that we allow and sometimes choose in our own lives. Mm-hmm. But when we choose to move out of the chaos, there are some people that will not go with us. They may come along later, they may not. Part of the moving from chaos to clarity is really being willing to come to that place where you're willing to go it alone. Meaning, I'm going to put myself in a better mental, physical, and emotional place so that my life is more stable emotionally, physically, and mentally, right? And so there are consequences to staying in chaos, and there are consequences to getting out of chaos. But here's one of the things that I've used over the years in my own assessment. If I know that doing X, Y, and Z gets this result, whatever this is, and I don't like that result, then I can't keep doing X, Y, and Z. It makes no sense to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result, right? You keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result is insanity. So when we're choosing to get out of chaos, it's going to require new mindsets, new decisions, right? So the chaos to clarity is, like we said, by degrees. It's really understanding that we are going to have to do things differently, think things differently, maybe even shift some of our relationships.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You made some great points there. There is going to be a cost. We did talk about that, but it's, in a way, it's like cleaning out your emotional closet. One of the costs, though, is when we are constantly in fight or flight, it does take a toll on our body. High blood pressure, cortisol buildup. We are vibrating, or not even vibrating, but just running at this higher level, and we think we're getting fatter. We're actually holding fluid. Our body is just holding on to everything, because with fight to flight, we never know. Our psyche doesn't know if we're going to get another meal. Are we going to get more water? Are we going to get this? Are we going to get that? We're in crisis. We've got to go into lockdown and hold on to everything, including the bad emotions. And sometimes we don't even know what those things are that are triggering us. And one of the easiest ways to find out is to keep a dream journal, start speaking with yourself in your dreams, and a day journal. Just start writing down everything that's going on. Once a week, go in and read everything that you wrote in there, and there's a pattern that's going to start to show up. And that pattern is going to tell you what you need to change and why you need to change it and what to look for. And when we start making those changes, it's much like cleaning out your emotional closet. You might have a dress in there from high school. You love the colors, but it doesn't fit anymore. Doesn't mean it's not a great dress. It's just not for you anymore. So you need to give it away. You're never going to fit in that dress again. And it doesn't feel good when you put it on. That's what's going to happen with your relationships. You're going to have people that you've had forever. But suddenly, now that you change, they're not going to fit with you. They're not going to fit in your life. And when you're around them, you don't feel good. And that's a sign and a signal. And you let them go with love. That's another really important thing. Just as you let go of your clothing in your closet with love, put it into a bag, take it somewhere else, and donate it, you're going to donate those friends to somewhere else. They will find someone else. If you keep blocking their negative advances, you're not going to be feeding them anymore. They're feeding off of you, and they will go find someone else to feed off of, and you can work on yourself. Then you've got to find your own strength. And that's a big important step. And when they come back, if they really do want to be with you because they love you, they will make the change as well.
That's a really good point. But sometimes I think it's not as much about them loving you as it is about them loving the place they're at, their fear of something new. In other words, it's not always as simple as if they'd love me, they would change, because there is a cost to each one of us to change, right? And everybody gets to choose. So people can love us and not be able to go with us.
Mm-hmm. And that's where we let them go with love. We let them go with love. Because anytime you harbor bad feelings about someone, it's only going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt them. They don't care. It's only going to hurt you. So you have to come to the realization that they're different from you. They think differently than you. And the way they think and the way they are is not good for you. It's like eating a bag of candy. One little piece of candy is fine. It's great. But sitting down and just eating one bag of candy after another bag of candy all the time, too much of a good thing's a bad thing. And too much of a bad thing is just a bad thing. So there comes a point where you need to make the change and go on your own path.
It makes me think of world explorers back in the day when people thought the world was flat or they didn't think there was anything beyond the edge of their land, right? Many times when we're moving from chaos to clarity, we're just like those early explorers. We're believing in the land far away. We're believing that there is a better way. There is a better emotional state. There is a better relationship. And as we grow, we build those ships, those virtual ships, if you will, the new decisions, the new pathways to get there. There's a certain level, like you mentioned earlier, faith in the journey. It takes a step of faith because we are like those explorers. We are looking for a different land, a different outcome, a different situation, a different kind of relationship, a different kind of us. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm in chaos, I'm the common denominator. You know, I'm with me all the time. And if chaos follows me, there's a really good chance that I'm contributing to that chaos in some way, shape, or form. But if we build those ships to go on that adventure of the unknown to a new land, a new way of being, you know, sometimes people didn't agree with some of these explorers. They were persecuted for the decisions that they made. People didn't believe in them until it was done. And then people got the picture. Once they found that land, once they brought back the gold or they brought back the silk or whatever. And that's really what's happening when we're moving from chaos to clarity. We're like that explorer. We're embarking on an adventure that some people cannot wrap their minds around. Because it shakes their world, that butterfly effect, right? They're feeling the ripples and they don't even understand yet. And that's okay. Because sometimes when you and I make a decision for the good of our own lives, we take that adventure, we build that ship, we go on that seeking that better place, better mental health, emotional health, physical health. Sometimes it's in the doing that and accomplishing that and going through that that empowers the other people. Some people may come along later, maybe, but they don't have enough faith themselves. So we have to build the ship and go on that journey so that other people can see that there is, in fact, a possibility of having a life without all that chaos all the time.
You made some great points there. And one of the points that really struck me was, you talk about how, the explorers, they're out in their ship proving that the world is not flat and they're not going to drop off the edge of the earth. How did they prove that? By coming back with the gold. So in your case as a woman, you have to prove that there is something beyond what everybody else that wants to hold you back can see. And sometimes the only way to do that is when you come back and you show them your golden nuggets of wisdom, and that not only are you still alive, but you're better for having done it. And that, again, changing your behavior begins to change theirs. They realize you're not the same person who left in that ship. The ship that returned has a very different person, a stronger person, someone who doesn't hate them either, but somebody who understands that they have their limitations and that they're going on without them, but they still love them. I mean, sometimes we have to do that with our parents. We have to leave. We have to go. Oh, no, you're not going to be able to make it without us. And then you come back from college and you say, hey, I've got a degree. I've got this great job. I have a relationship. I have been able to make it. And now they treat you differently as an adult.
I love how you said, not only are you alive after taking that journey, right? You're better for having done it. Some people don't quite yet have the ability to see that broadly in life yet. Their life experience has told them to stay small. Mm-hmm. Don't raise your hand, don't stand out, don't pop your head up, just keep your head down and know nothing. This is the worst it'll get. And that's a chaos in and of itself. Wouldn't you agree, Kathleen? When people choose to stay small, because we know we're meant for something more. I think there are people who the amount of effort it takes to shush their own spirit and that voice in their head that this isn't what you're meant to be doing. That's a chaos in and of itself, is it not?
Yes, it is. And we've pretty much been trained to do that. If we are good in school, we're quiet, we don't speak out, we raise our hand. There are rules. If we're good in church, we believe everything that we're told and you don't question it, because if you question it, you're questioning God and you can't do that. Well, let me tell you something. I question God all the time and he loves it. So, do you dare to be that poppy who pops its head above the rest of the poppies and take a chance on getting plucked? Doesn't matter if you do get plucked, you will just grow another flower. It's not the end. You still have your roots. You still have your stem. You still have your leaves. You'll be okay. And so, yes, you make a great point there. Some of us can't just, I understand, some of us can't just jump in that ship and take off and then come back. Some of us need to go in degrees. Got to go a little further, come back. Go a little further, come back. And then one day, we're like that little bird that flies out of the nest and is gone. And I wrote an article about this because I had this beautiful little dove family nesting on our porch. And there was one little baby dove in there. And finally, it was time for baby dove to get out of the nest and start flying. The baby dove didn't want to do that. And so the parents got off the nest and they were calling to him. And no, he didn't want to change. He was comfortable in that nest. They would come and feed him. He wasn't going anywhere. And so they stopped feeding him. They got up on the roof and they were calling him. And finally he jumped down and they rewarded him by coming down and feeding him. And do you know that little booger climbed back up the branch and got back in the nest? Because that was like, okay, I came down, I got fed, I'm back where I'm comfortable. And it took him a couple of times to get out of the nest, get onto the wall, finally fly up to the roof to where he didn't come back to the nest. But each time after he was fed, he went a little bit farther when he was hungry, but he always came back until finally one day he said, you know what? That nest is really small now, and I'm not going to come back anymore. And they took off. But I remember the third time the father actually got in the nest and kicked him out. He still climbed back up in there one more time. And they said, now we're not going to feed him anymore. So, yeah, and that's us. We want to keep going back to that nest. We will climb that branch with our wings and our feet like a cat, despite the fact that we're a bird, and sit up in there and wait, because that change is frightening. But eventually, we go a little further each time, until we build the confidence to say, okay, now I'm going to put the wind in my sails and I'm going to take off for a while on my own, trust in myself, trust in my higher power. And when I come back, I'm going to know I can do it. And that's the big aha moment. I can do this.
I love that. I mean, it's an analogy for life, is it not? You said, and I love this, the nest is too small. At some point, when we go out and come back and go out and come back and go out and come back, that expansion of our life, that expansion of our understanding, that expansion of our knowledge and experience will at some point alert us to the fact that this situation that we allow ourselves, that we choose to stay in, is too small for us. This isn't the right fit anymore. And maybe at some point it served a purpose. And I think when we're moving out of chaos, one of the greatest tools that's coming to my mind, because I had to work through some chaos as well when I was younger, is not holding ourselves. How do I want to put this? We can't judge ourselves for the choices that we made in the past. Sometimes things happen to us and we stayed in that place. We have to extend grace. Part of that moving through chaos to clarity really is extending grace to ourselves first, and understanding that for whatever reason, we stayed there. We might have chosen to be there. It might have happened to us, and then we chose to stay regardless. We can't beat ourselves up for it. It's not going to help. We have to extend grace to ourselves first. And then you mentioned forgiveness earlier. We forgive ourselves. Look at ourselves in the face, in the mirror, in our own eyes, and say, I forgive you. Mm-hmm. Because we can't be beating ourselves up and moving through the process to clarity. We're creating more chaos. There has to come a point where we acknowledge, yes, I made that decision. Okay. Right? That's one of those getting on the ship and going out a ways. It's just acknowledging, for whatever reason, it doesn't even matter. I'm not happy here anymore. And when I come back, I recognize this doesn't fit. And even if we don't know what the answer is, or what the right nest size is, if you will, I think it comes. I think that clarity, you mentioned earlier that the clarity comes in small degrees. And trusting that process is the hardest part. Once we've made the decision to move through the chaos, I think the most challenging part, at least in my experience, has been trusting the process and understanding that sometimes there's leaps and sometimes there's crawls. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And, those little nuggets of knowledge that we bring back, they're not a full bracelet yet. They're not a full necklace yet, but they're the beginning of your bracelet and necklace. They're those little nuggets of gold. And I think, from listening to you, I this other thought came into my mind, that the stories in this book also made me realize there's a difference between being passive and dependent versus humble and respectful. Just because someone is listening to you does not mean they're passive and dependent. It's very possible that they are very humble and they are respecting your mind thoughts as they are in that place, because we are exactly where we are at any time, because that's where we need to be, and we can't be anywhere else. So I remember many times when people would say to me, are you listening to me? Did you not hear what I said? And I would say, yes, I did. but that's you. I'm respecting your thoughts. Doesn't mean they fit for me. And whereas a passive person would go, oh, yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. It doesn't matter. I have to put my needs on the back burner and only do what you tell me to do and be dependent on you. And that's not necessarily so. You can dare to flap your wings, fly out of that nest, and still listen to people. Doesn't mean you have to do what they say, believe what they say, but by being respectful, you're showing them that you are humble but strong. And that's a big step for women, for people who come back to the nest and say, the nest doesn't fit, but it did at one time. I'm very grateful for the nest. I'm glad it was there, but I'm out of it now.
I love that perspective of just because someone you love tells you something doesn't mean you have to do it. You can respect their opinion and still choose differently. And I think that is one of those things that women struggle with. We feel obligated for some reason to be obedient or submissive, or I don't know what the word is, because I think submissive is not as negative a word as we use it. It has its benefit. But I love the idea that the nuggets of knowledge that we're gathering are at some point going to create a beautiful string. Right? And that's what this book is. It's beautiful strings of pearls from different people's experiences. And I think what we're seeing right now in the current world situation is the negative news. People get addicted to the negative news. They get addicted to the chaos and the panic. We are literally living through watching how the world handles what they perceive is scary. And there is something to be said for that person who decides, you know what, I'm going to think differently because I already know what the results are of this thought pattern, these decisions. And in order to separate ourselves from chaos, we have to be different. We just have to be different. So as I'm thinking through these processes and all the things that we've talked about, my mind is swirling with thoughts and ideas, my own life experience as well. Maybe the women that are listening to this, Kathleen, they might be impacted on 100 different levels. Maybe they're in the chaos and they're feeling overwhelmed or afraid. It could be someone in the midst of moving through their chaos and they're frustrated because it's not moving fast enough. That's my personality. Come on, I've started. Where's the other end? Right? Or it could be someone who has moved through one level of chaos, gotten some clarity, and now they're recognizing that, oh, that was just one layer, right? It's not a one and done. Now there's this next level of growth and opportunity for me. So we don't know the women that are hearing this right now, but what are 3 things that you could encourage women, wherever they're at in their journeys with chaos to clarity, that might help them to kind of anchor in a little bit and have the courage to take that next step, to fly, to jump a little further out of the nest? What would those 3 things be?
I think, like I said before, keep a journal so you know what you are doing, because it's so easy to forget or get distracted when you're in chaos. So sit down and gather your thoughts every night before you go to sleep. Write down what you learned, what you did during the day, and you'll start to see a pattern emerge. The next thing is keep a dream journal for sure, because our dreams are a microcosm of our daily life. And we can also do dream work. And dream work is where we're presented with a problem in our dreams, and we're allowed to use any solution we want, even if it means beheading the person irritating us in the dream, because there is no wrong in a dream. You can't go to jail for beheading someone in a dream, but the emotion that you feel from possibly attacking that person might tell you that that's not a solution, because it makes you feel worse afterward than what you were feeling before. Use your dreams as a proving ground to come up with your solutions. And the third one, I think, is forgive yourself and understand you're human, and that this is all part of your learning curve as an individual. You were talking about pearls. I love using pearls as an analogy, and I have a number of stories about pearls because if you think about them, they're this irritating little piece of sand, like the sand in your shoe that creates a blister. Well, the sand creates almost like a blister inside of that mollusk. And out of that annoying, ugly piece of sand comes this beautiful pearl. So if you've had a lot of sand in your life, it's time to search for the pearl in your life. String those pearls together and wear your pearls. Wear them with pride. You deserved them. You created them. Wear them. They're yours.
I love the idea that there's beauty from ashes. And I think in my life and in the lives of those I love, I've definitely seen that principle where something that was so maybe awful, difficult, ugly, at some point it shifts and you're able to see the true nature of it. It may have been one thing at the beginning, but like you said, like that pearl, it becomes something so beautiful, and we wouldn't have the beauty without the difficulty. And I think that's one of the things in moving from chaos to clarity is the faith in the process that what is difficult now is going to be beautiful later. And if we can look for the bits of beauty along the way, right, to keep our faith in the process. So I want to thank you so much, Kathleen, for spending time with me today and having this really powerful conversation about the reality of all of our lives at some point in some way that we do experience chaos, and for the encouragement that you brought that clarity is possible for each one of us. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful. So today I've been speaking with Kathleen-Okeefe-Kanavos. She is the Queen of Dreams, a 3-time breast cancer survivor and the co-author of Chaos to Clarity, Sacred Stories of Transformational Change. If you head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 154, I will have a link to this book. And you can add your name and email address and join my tribe as well while you're there. Friends, each one of us experiences chaos in our life to some degree. Please know that you're not alone in this journey. Please know that other people have a common experience with you somewhere in the world. And resources like this book, Chaos to Clarity, are a great place to go to really recognize that the world is much smaller than we think it is. We are not alone, and we don't have to continue to feel alone. So please access this resource. Access it for yourself, access it for a friend, share this podcast with someone, start your own conversations about building your own shifts and taking the journeys that are in your heart to take. Trust, have faith, forgive yourself, keep track of what you're thinking, get it out of your mind and journal. Take these tools, use them, let us know how they work for you. And thank you so much for taking the time to have a cup of something wonderful and join us for this conversation. We look forward to sharing more inspiration and resources with you in the future. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.